As many of you know, no stranger to Colorado, Elliot Eisenberg, PhD, is an internationally acclaimed economist and public speaker, specializing in making economics fun, relevant, and certainly educational. His research and opinions have been featured in Bloomberg, Business Week, Bureau of National Affairs, Forbes, Fortune, and many, many other publications. Dr. Eisenberg was formerly the senior economist with the National Association of Home Builders in Washington, D.C. He's a regular consultant to several large real estate professional associations, financial institutions, and investment advisory groups. Elliot, it's an honor to have you with us. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you. Thank you for that warm welcome. Thank you, Chris. Let's begin. My gosh, there's a lot to talk about. And as most of you know, when I like to begin my talks, it's always, let's go through GDP. That's the single most important thing that'll give us a structure to think about things. And you see the C, the I, the G, and the X minus M. C is household consumption. It was what was carrying us in January and February, in the last half of last year, most of last year, really. I, corporate investments in plant and equipment, government spending. G, wasn't really going anywhere, and net exports weren't going anywhere either. It was C. And what's happened is this coronavirus thing, because they've locked us all in our houses, C's now gone into the garbage can. And the way we're trying to fix this is by getting G up. G is going to expand dramatically through all the things that we'll talk about them. And by pushing G up, they're going to put money into our hands. That'll help us spend money. And that will keep the economy afloat while we remain in this weird economic coma, limbo, timeout, whatever you want to call it. But the key thing is the government wants to prevent the healthcare crisis from becoming the healthcare crisis from becoming a financial crisis, and God forbid the financial crisis from becoming an economic crisis. So you're trying to put a buffer between the healthcare and the finance and the economics, and they're putting these buffers in by stimulating the hell out of our economy with lots of money. And you can see how important this money is, because look at these forecasts. These are forecasts put up by different investment banks and places, and you can see Q2 GDP ranging anywhere from -10 to -40. I personally think it's going to end up being somewhere around -30 or -28 if I really get it right, a little bit less than -30. This is an economic forecast by a consensus of economists. You can see poor Q1, objectively a really crummy Q1. Q1 doesn't look that bad because Q2 looks horrible. But if you look in the far left of the graph, you can see what went on during the Great Recession. 18 months, 6 quarters of bad numbers. And you can see the number that we've got right now expected for Q1 is almost as bad as the second worst number in the 6 quarters of crappy numbers for the Great Recession. So this is objectively a pretty poor number, but Q2 puts it into perspective. And Q2 is just downright friggin' ugly. There's no question. In terms of the recovery in Q3 and Q4, the consensus of economists have us growing at somewhere around 6-7%, 6% in Q3 and 7% in Q4. I'm not quite that optimistic. I think it'll take longer to get going, but certainly by Q4 we're good to go, and Q3 could be mildly negative, maybe mildly positive. But Q2 is just going to be horrible. That's the key point I want to get through to you at this point. And you can see why. Here's the University of Michigan Consumer Confidence Index. It came out yesterday or day before yesterday, Thursday. I think a Thursday or Friday it came out. And you can see it's pretty crummy. It's not quite as crummy as it was during the Great Recession, but it'll get worse, don't worry, because we still haven't quite acclimated to the current situation we find ourselves. This is hotel occupancies. Well, we're not going anywhere. We're not flying anywhere. We're not going to any hotels, right? So it's way down. It's down 60, 70, 80, 70%. It's down way down. It's down from 65 to 40. This is a huge decline. You can see this is the hotel occupancy rates last week were as bad as they were in the week after Christmas. That's how bad things are, right? Air travel is down 95%. In entire industries, entire sectors of our economy is completely closed down. Movie ticket sales are well down. Restaurant traffic, this is takeout traffic. This comes from Open Table. It's not takeout. So McDonald's is doing better and Wendy's are doing better, and that's important. And other restaurants have gotten to do more takeout, but you're not going to have fancier restaurants doing takeout. So total employment and so on in the restaurant industry will be well down, even if there's some takeout activity going. Now, let's look at light vehicle sales. Light vehicle sales are a particularly important thing to look at because their supply chains are very big. And they're the next biggest thing people buy outside of, you guessed it, a house. And look on the very, very far right of this graph. You can see the total spending on cars has fallen by a third. And that third, interestingly enough, is composed of two parts. The first half of March, when we were still going around but we were nervous, they fell by 15%. The second half of March, they must have fallen by closer to 45% to get to the 30% decline. So the second half of March was just absolutely dismal, and that will be like April. So in April, we may even have less sales because they'll have a full month like the second half of March. People don't leave their house. They're not buying a car. They've got nowhere to go, right? I mean, this is not, this is pretty obvious. But there is good news out there. Alcohol sales are way up. So if you're in the booze business, congratulations. Now, the booze sales skyrocketed, and now they're coming down a little bit because either we're getting more cirrhosis of the liver, I'm joking, I hope, or we've just acclimated to living. We bought a lot in advance, and we just can't drink it quite as fast as we hoped, we thought, we feared. I don't know what. Gun sales are up, so if you're selling a gun shop with booze, that's even better, although a bad combo, I suppose. And last but not least, marijuana sales are well up. So there are sectors that are doing well. Maybe it's because we're spending too much time with our families, and we realize a little bit of mental separation is needed, if not physical separation. You put it together, personal consumption expenditures, 70% of GDP, which is the most important thing, and it was the only thing driving our economy prior to the recession, onset of the recession, which happened in the week of May 9th, March 9th, if I'm not mistaken, when we had a huge increase in unemployment. It's going to drop by 10, 12, 15%. I mean, this is 20%. A precipitous decline in the second quarter, right? Because we're home, we're not doing anything. And we're going to stay alive if all goes well because of government intervention and this money that they're giving us to keep us going during this crazy situation that we find ourselves in. The second term in GDP is I. It was already going nowhere beforehand for a bunch of reasons. And now you can see here in this graph, small business confidence dropped quite substantially from its prior level of the low 100s. It's now in the mid 90s. And I suspect it'll get a little bit lower before things are all said and done. I think there's expectation that the PPP loans and the EIDL loans and all these other things that are aimed at small business will help. And they will, and they'll make a huge difference. And this government intervention, to put it mildly, has been huge, quick, and that's very different than it was last time, 12 years ago, when Fannie and Freddie were nationalized and Bear Stearns went under and Lehman Brothers in September or October. It took the government last time a lot longer. And this government intervention is going to prevent the worst from happening by far. This will not turn into the Great Depression. This will be a slow recovery, a faster recovery, but it'll be a recovery and it'll be a relatively short recession, assuming coronavirus cooperates. Now, the second term, corporate investment's not doing well in part because energy's doing badly. I mean, they're trying to now big compromise OPEC and Russia, and even the U.S. has gotten involved, trying to reduce oil production by 10 million barrels. I'm not sure it's going to make much of a difference because we're 30 million barrels overproducing right now because we've had a once-in-a-generation unnecessary increase in production by about 3 or 4 million barrels from the Russians and the Saudis fighting, and a once-in-a-lifetime reduction in demand by 20 million barrels because we're not flying and driving and going anywhere all over the world. So to reduce it by 10 million barrels, while helpful, is like, putting a Band-Aid on a dam that's broken. It's going to do something, but not a lot, all else equal. So you can see here, global demand well down by quarter, different assessments, different groups, but there's been massive destruction in demand here. And as a result, oil prices are in free fall. Natural gas prices aren't doing very well either. So all the energy states are getting hit a little extra because of this. In Texas and the Permian Basin and eastern New Mexico, especially hard, and North Dakota, especially hard. But Colorado, Weld County, they're going to feel it as well, necessarily. Corporate profits, they're not going to be going anywhere this year. We know that. And if you look at this graph, the BBB corporate debt in gray is what I want you to focus on. It's barely above investment grade. If this is investment grade, AAA, AA, A, BBB sits here. If it gets downgraded, it falls below the magic line. It's no longer investment grade. This is one of the things the central bank is trying desperately to stop, this creating a financial crisis. We don't want a financial crisis. If financial markets seize up, if spreads between different types, qualities of bonds start to really widen a lot, it gets very hard to refinance debt. But nonetheless, you're having downgrades on this debt. You can see in the far right, the purple, the far right bar on the right, the top purple part is downgrades of BBB debt to below BBB or no longer investment grade. And the central bank, among other things, by putting tons of money into the economy, is trying to reduce the impacts of all these bad things happening in financial markets. Because if enough bad things happen in financial markets, it seeps over into the real economy and becomes an economic problem, not just a financial market problem. Right? The one, healthcare, again, seeping into finances, seeping into the real economy. Right? This is the issue that the central bank is trying desperately to avoid, and the Congress and everybody. Manufacturing is back in recession. It was just getting out of recession, kind of the end of last year, early this, and now we're back in. Now you can see here, it's not going to be tremendously volatile, but it'll fall. The blue line and the yellow line, which are both now well below the x-axis there, red's not in this graph, but it'll get there soon enough. Trust me on that score. So manufacturing is in recession. Profits are down. This graph shows factory utilization rates that have been dwindling going down for a year and a half already, because of trade wars and slowing global growth and strong U.S. dollar and stuff, which are just background music now. But because factory utilization rates weren't high, firms aren't going to invest. The second term in GDP ain't going to do anything. Now, the third term. This is critically important. G. This is the magical term. The central government, the federal government, and the central bank are so actively involved this time around. Last recession, the Great Recession of 2008-9, pardon me, took the government 8 or 9 months until October before they really began to do things like the TARP and then the ARRA with I think late in Bush's term, and then Obama did more in his term, early in his term. This was like a year into the recession already. Here, the central bank and the federal government, the Congress got involved a week after the recession begins. I mean, they weren't quick enough, in my opinion, and they didn't do enough yet, but they're on it. They're paying attention. They're going to have a fourth bill. This picture shows what's going on, all the different things that are being done, right? And the key thing I want you to look at here is small business, the $377 billion. This is the PPP loans. I think the EIDL loans are coming somewhere else. But there's effort to help individuals through pension, through welfare, through unemployment insurance, extending the duration of unemployment and the amount of unemployment, so you have purchasing power if you lose your job. We're trying to keep firms alive, big firms, small firms. And then the central bank was given in here $454 billion to lend. And if they lend at 10 to 1, that's $4.5 trillion. So you've got $4.5 trillion there. This is 2.2 minus that 450 is 1.8. You've got almost over $6 trillion of money that's going to be out there trying to keep the economy afloat while we're in this coma. And they'll need more money. It's not going to be that fast. We're not going to get out of it nearly as quickly as we think, because we're not going to open the economy up straight away on May 1st. It's not going to happen. Is the budget deficit going to explode? You better believe it. But don't worry about it. This is not the time to worry about it. When the house is burning, you don't worry about your water bill. You get the fire turned off, you get the insurance money, and then you put on some better faucet protector thingamabobs to get the water bill down. But now is not the time. The house is burning. The central government and the central bank, the federal government, are doing at this point a tremendous amount. They've prevented the worst from happening. You have a mild trade war too, which isn't helping. The cost of importing stuff from China is still higher than it should be, and exports are hampered because of it. But again, this is now virtually background music in the short run because of Corona. And the dollar is very strong. Why is the dollar strong? The dollar is strong because everybody wants dollars when you're nervous. You don't want euros, you don't want yen, you don't want pounds, you want dollars. So everybody wants dollars. The central bank has made dollars available for all central banks, the 16 biggest central banks, Canada, Australia, England, EU, Europe, ECB, and China, so that people's demand won't push the dollar higher, which is an important thing for us. But the central bank is they're all in. I mean, they're doing things they never dreamt of doing. They're taking Bernanke's playbook from 2008 and expanding it with more chapters. They're really aggressive. And Powell, the central bank chair, said he'll do whatever it takes to keep the financial system working and credit moving around as best he humanly can. And he's done a good job. Now, this graph tells you how precipitous the decline in our economy has been. Normally, this graph is in a short little space between +1 and -1. And now This graph here doesn't show you the severity of the decline. It's about minus 27 on the back of the prior graph. Minus 27 right there. Unbelievable, right? This next graph here shows you how big the decline in the last month has been vis-a-vis the last 5 or 6 or 7 years of economic activity since 15, 16, 17, 18, 5 years of activity. This is 12 standard deviations. So if somebody asked me, Elliot, what are the chances of this happening? I would say it's 0.00000000001, and yet it happened. This was so out of the blue, so inconceivable virtually. Labor markets, critically important because they're the guys who buy houses and buy cars and buy stuff. They were really tight, but look at it now. You see it bumping along the bottom of the graph for like 50 years, since 1960. Literally 50 years of little movement. And now look at last couple of weeks. It's at 7 million. It's 10 times its prior peak. The prior peak was 8182, when it was almost 700,000. Now it's 7 million. We've lost 17 million jobs. This is unprecedented decline. The rapidity of this decline is mind-boggling. That's why the federal government, Congress and the administration, the central bank are so actively involved, hoping to give money to households and small business and big business and hospitals and state and local governments that are being walloped because tax revenues coming down from sales taxes and income taxes and healthcare spending is skyrocketing. These places all need massive amounts of money. Look at this graph here. This is a 4-week moving average of initial claims of unemployment. And after 3 weeks of disaster, we're over 4 million. Again, you can see the blue line on the bottom going nowhere for in this case, 20 years. And unemployment's going to start to spike up. It'll be 10% next month when they release the April data, maybe 12%. Google searches for filing for unemployment have peaked out. They went up, they peaked about 2 weeks ago and have now been coming down. Hopefully that suggests unemployment claims are going to come down too. As for rates, they're going nowhere. Central bank has told us this. The Fed funds rate, oh, that's a mistake. It should be 0.125, not 1.125. My apologies. By the end of this year, they're going to stay where they are at 0.125. Next year, if we're really lucky and the economy is really good, and we've pretty much by the end of the year gotten back all the jobs that we lost or come really close, maybe they raise it 25 or 50. And maybe the following year they raise it another 25 or 50 bits. So maybe at the end of 2 years from now, maybe they raised rates 1%. And that's the best case scenario. It may well be a big fat zero because Powell doesn't want to jinx the markets. He doesn't want to give investors any reason to fear that as job recovery takes place, he's going to start putting the hammer down. Remember, he wants inflation to go up, and right now there's massive deflationary pressures in all sectors of the economy, restaurants, hotels, airlines, all the movies, all these things, massive deflationary pressures out there. So that rates aren't going to go anywhere. There's no question. Now, as for housing, what's the story with housing? I'm not too optimistic in the short run. I mean, in the long run, the fundamentals are pretty good. We're still vastly underbuilt. There's a vast undersupply of housing. We need many more houses than are being built. Builders haven't built nearly as many. That's going to remain. Our population's not going to go down. It continues to rise. The jobs will recover. The question is the immediate short run. And in the immediate short run, we see copper prices that are really low. And every new home has got copper. Every new building has copper. Almost all new things, anything with electricity or batteries, and it's got copper. So if you see copper prices down, not a good sign. And now this is true. It shows mostly China because they're the marginal buyer of all commodities. But when we know we're not going to have corporate investments in plant and equipment, we know home builders are starting to have real trouble getting stuff built, right? They can't get permits. They can't get suppliers. They can't get workers. There's tons of impediments being put in their way. And we see from the University of Michigan's monthly or bi-monthly survey of consumer sentiment, buying sentiment for large household durables, not houses, this is not cars, but it's everything else, not houses, not cars, has plummeted. So in a situation when you're at home, when you're not buying cars, looked at earlier, and you're not buying durables, it's very hard to see a story where you can convince people we're going to buy houses. In the short run, we're not going to be buying houses, right? We know this from the Mortgage Bankers Association, who puts out weekly data on this. And the last 3 weeks, first-time mortgage apps have been getting progressively worse. So 3 weeks ago, which means data from 4 weeks ago, sales were year over year were down 11%. 3 weeks ago, meaning 2 weeks ago, meaning 3 weeks ago's data, they were down 24%. And last week's, meaning 2 weeks ago's data, was down, as this graph shows, 33%. So you've got first-time mortgage apps down by 33%, car sales down probably by 50%, durable purchases simply not happening. In the short run, this isn't going to go. Housing sales can't possibly do well. I saw listings data today from Redfin. Okay, they're a different business model, and they've laid off a bunch of their staff, but delistings from their data have skyrocketed. You can't sell a house that delists either, and it's hard to show a house if somebody's inside it. I mean, the impediments here are just absolutely vast, right? If you put this into perspective, so this is the same graph I'm showing you here, the same graph you've got here, but instead of looking at the years in the time series way, we're looking at every year as one graph put on top of the other. So it shows you the magnitude of the decline, if you will. And look at that blue line. It's down precipitous. We're now, 8-9 years of decline in mortgage purchase applications. This has to mean we're buying fewer homes, right? Now we can say this is going to end some point, and GDP in Q3 is either neutral or middle positive. Q4 should be pleasantly positive, and 2021 should be just a gangbuster year. So this is a short-run problem, but it's not a trivial problem. You don't go out and wreck your capital structure. Right? Don't go hire 12 new agents. Maybe think about which agents you want to pick off from other firms when they go under. That's something to have a list on. But I wouldn't spend a lot of money right now because we don't know how long this will last. And this is what I want to end my conversation. First, this is how to get a hold of me: cell number, phone number, Twitter handle, all these things. And I put out 70 words on economics. This, as you mentioned earlier, the way to get, if you want to hear from me every day at night, 70 words, no graphs, no ads, no charts, no links, no photos. You can text the word bow tie, just the way you see it, BOWTIE, no hyphen between the words bow and tie, no space between them. One word, the 5-digit number 22828. You'll hear from me every day until you die. And if you die and go to hell because you drink too much booze, marijuana, and buy too many guns, then I'll follow you there too. I'm kidding. So let's end off with the coronavirus itself. Everything I've told you has been predicated on this thing ending soonish, and the government allowing us to open up soonish. Maybe we begin to open in early May if all goes well, maybe middle of May, and we open slowly. It's first going to be, office space with more spacing. The last thing to open up is going to be a baseball game or a rock concert, right? Those are going to take a long time, and they may not open for a year or two. I don't know until we have a vaccine because the risk is too big. But will this thing come back in 6 months in the fall? 8 months? Who knows? Will we get out in time? I don't know. The longer it lasts, the more serious the recession and the more damage, the slower the recovery will be, because the more tenuous the relationships between employers and their employees become. We want this to end quickly, but not so quickly that we endanger ourselves again with a rebound in the virus until we have at least a protocol to help people who are sick beyond intubating them and praying, essentially, right? And we need to get a vaccine down the road, but that's not going to be there for a while. So assuming that this vaccine goes into quasi-hibernation for a while, and we know how to social distance and remain socially distanced for the foreseeable future, we can slowly open up the economy and see how it does. We may not be able to open our borders because we don't know who's going to be coming in. So it's tenuous. But if things slow down and we have to stay in our homes longer, the government will borrow more money. I mean, they've already told us they are going to do everything they can to prevent this from becoming an economic disaster beyond the minimal amount it has to be, and the damage it's causing by having to stay in our houses. But they're going to preserve our purchasing power. They're allowing people to stay in their homes and give forbearance on mortgages. And they're allowing tenants, if Fannie and Freddie hold a mortgage on that multi-fam structure, to not pay their rent, and they won't make the landlord pay the mortgage either. So they're doing things much smarter. They're getting the money much quicker. But there are certainly, hopefully, I'm optimistic. We know the worst won't happen, but we simply don't know when this will exactly end. That's the big problem. The data is pretty good. We're hitting our peaks right now. 10 days, it should almost all be over. So this May 1st or May 10th seems reasonable. I hope I've given you some food for thought. I don't want to leave you in a really negative area here. Just that the threats are real. I don't want you to think that May 1st, everything's back to normal. You watch the countries that are opening up, and it's slow and steady, and they're making them in Eastern Europe, where they've had very few deaths because they closed down their countries really fast. They're making them wear face masks every time they go out of the house. All kinds of we may have to do that sort of things if we start going out. We have some time for questions and answers. I hope I can answer some or most, whatever. Thank you very much for your time. Sign up for my blog, and thank you very much.
All right. Thank you so much, Elliot. You have a ton of Coldwell Banker fans. Lots of love coming in through chat, so we appreciate your time. Thanks again, and be safe. Chris, back to you.
Thank you, Tammy. Thank you, Chris.